Hi, I'm Nicola from Adore Yoga, and today I'm going to talk about the intake process for private students. With yoga therapy, it's often quite a lengthy intake process because we need to understand a lot about that student and a little bit about the background of that health issue, what their experience of it is. And so the intake process can take a little bit of time, and it's very detailed. And one of the tools that we use to help us with this is called the Vyuha model. Now, the Vyuha model is he was writing 2,000 years ago, and he took all of the knowledge that was passed down orally, traditionally, and he codified philosophies and practices of yoga. So we get this Vyuha model, this four-step process of assessing and supporting students from Patanjali. So the Vyuha model is designed to help us assess the primary concern for that student is. And sometimes that's not as straightforward as it might seem at first. And then once we've understood what the students' health issues are and what they need and what their goal is, then this model helps us to choose the right techniques, the right practices to support that student to manage their health issues. So this is the Vyuha four-step model. Now, there's quite a lot to this model. There's a lot to unpack. So I'm just going to go through the very basic steps so that you get an outline and an overview of how this works. So the four steps are Hayam, which is recognizing and understanding the student's symptoms. And the second one is the Hetu. And Hetu is the process of learning about the causes of the student's symptoms. What is it that sits behind that student's symptoms? So the third step is the Hanam. And this is an important step. It's about setting a goal or a priority for a student's treatment after their assessment. And we do that in partnership with the student. We don't just think that we know best and we set a priority or a goal. That's a collaboration with the student. So the fourth step is Upayam. And Upayam is where we get to decide which of the many tools and techniques of yoga we teach to that student. And we have to choose tools that are appropriate for that individual student and that will also support that student to meet their well-being goals. So those are the four steps in a nutshell. And I'll go through and I'll break them down. So the first step is the Hayam, that recognition of symptoms. And we go beyond just recognizing physiological symptoms in yoga therapy. So yeah, sure, we're going to look at the physiology and the posture and the patterns in the body. If they have physical pain, we're going to understand where that is and how it manifests. But the Yoga Sutras teach us that we are more than just a body walking around. We are multidimensional. There are many layers to us. So again, taking you back to your level 1 yoga teacher training, you'll probably remember the koshas. So the koshas are the 5 layers, the 5 multi-dimensions of our being. So the first one is the Annamaya. So that's the outer physical layer of our being. And then the Pranamaya, which is the breath or the energy layer. And the third one is the Manamaya, so the mental layer of our being. Then the Vijnanamaya, which is described as the higher mind or the intuition. And then finally the Anandamaya, which is the bliss layer, the transcendent love that is part of our birthright. So in yoga therapy, that Hayam process is all about recognizing the symptoms in all of the layers of our being, the body, the breath, the mental, the emotional, and not just looking at the body to see what might be sore or uncomfortable. So the second step in this process is the Hetu, and that's the causes of the symptoms. So in yoga therapy, we don't want to just deal with the surface symptoms and fix people up and send them off. Deep into those symptoms to get an understanding of the causes of what lies behind the symptoms that the student is experiencing. So sometimes this is quite straightforward. A student may come to you called Karen, and she has a sore wrist. And perhaps Karen has a sore wrist because of RSI. Her workstation is not set up ergonomically, and so she has repetitive strain injury, and that's what's causing Karen's wrist pain. Or maybe Peter has come to see you with insomnia, and Peter has insomnia because he has a lot of family pressures at the moment, and it is the weight of those family pressures that are causing him to experience insomnia. But not all symptoms and causes of symptoms fit into a nice tidy box like that. And even straightforward examples like Peter and Karen often have other things going on that we need to be aware of in order to provide a really effective and appropriate practice. So Patanjali tells us that there are a number of causes or potential causes for our symptoms. And those include, again, something that you would have learned about in your level 1 teacher training, which is the kleshas. So remember, the kleshas are the causes of suffering. And they are ego or false identity, fear, attachment or desire, aversion or hatred, and ignorance or not understanding. So those are the kleshas, and they're the causes of all our sufferings. And the chances are that there's going to be some element of one or more of the kleshas sitting behind being the causes or partial causes of symptoms that your student might be experiencing. Another cause of symptoms that Patanjali talks about is parinama, which means change. So things change internally, environmentally, and it can lead to suffering and symptoms. And perhaps it's a simple change that has led to this. Another cause would be samskara. Again, from your yoga teacher training, you'll be familiar with samskaras, which are these subconscious, unconscious patterns of belief, which lead us to behave in particular ways, which may in turn lead to behaviors that cause the symptoms that the student presents with. Another cause of suffering that Patanjali talks about is tapa, which is a desire or addiction or compelled to behave in a particular way. And then we have lifestyle choices. So ayukta vihara, which is our lifestyle choices, and ayukta ahara, which is our food choices. Now, these are not the only potential causes of the symptoms that we might see in our students, but these are the ones that Patanjali tells us about and more. So once the yoga teacher or therapist has worked with the student, has observed the student, has listened very carefully to what they say, and has determined what are the symptoms and what are some of the likely causes of those symptoms, the teacher then works with the student on the third step, which is the hanam. And hanam is fixing a goal or a priority or an outcome that student is looking for. And we have to collaborate with the student. The outcome or the goal that the student is looking for might not be the thing that seems most obvious to us. And as a yoga teacher or a therapist, we never know what is most important to the student. So I might ask a student a question like, if this yoga therapy session or this series of sessions really got to the heart of the issue that's brought you here, what would be different at the end of these sessions? What would change? What would your life be like if you got the exact results that you were looking for from your yoga therapy? And that encourages the student to think about, well, what is my goal? What do I want to get from this? And then you get very clear about that. And that becomes your yoga goal, your well-being goal that you and the student can work towards. So now we've got 3 steps. We have got the hayam, which is recognizing symptoms. We have the hetu, which is figuring out some of the causes of the symptoms. And of course, we have the hanam, which is deciding what our goal is, what our priorities are. So now we know all of those things. We can start to figure out what types of yoga practice this student's going to really need. And there are a number of types of yoga practice. So Patanjali tells us, and this is the upayam step, by the way, that we could choose to use Savarita Chikitsa. So Savarita Chikitsa is healing using the physical body. So that might be asana, yoga postures. It could be mudra, using the hands, or any kind of physical movement that improves health through the body. Another type of practice we could use is prana chikitsa, which would be healing using the breath. So we then might teach our students different practices that improve the health through the mechanism of the breath. And that might be pranayama or any practices that directly positively impact the five vayus, which again you may have learned about in your original teacher training, those five pranas that are in the body. Another form of healing we can use is indriya chikitsa, which is healing using the senses. So that might mean teaching our students about the yamas and the niyamas, which are all about sensory control. It may be teaching our students pratyahara. Again, you'll remember that's about withdrawing the senses from environmental distractions so that we can look inwards. And it may be supporting them with food and lifestyle choices that are going to support them to reach their yoga goal. And another type of practices that we can work with is manasika chikitsa, and that's healing using the mind. So think about all the different practices that that directly impact the mind that can then support students to move towards greater well-being. So that might be mantra and chanting, or bhavana, so visualization, changing the mindset, having a goal to move towards. Or it could be swadhyaya, that self-observation, observing one's own mind and one's own patterns. So those are the 4 steps of the Vyuha model that comes to us from Patanjali for assessing our private students, determining what matters most to them, and then figuring out which yoga practice we bring in for them to support them to improve their well-being and reach their goals. So that is the Hayam, the symptoms, the Hetu, the causes of the symptoms, the Hanam, which is setting the goal, and the Upayam, which is determining the tools that we're going to use with that student. So I hope you are inspired to use this model with your private students, and that's great because it's a very exciting model. It's very thorough. I do want you to bear in mind that this is just a rough guide, and the process is quite a lot more nuanced than I've explained. But I have something to help you use and get used to practicing the Vyuha model when you work with your students. So I have created a worksheet that you can use to step through those 4 steps of the Vyuha model and support your private students. So all you need is this worksheet and a volunteer student, so somebody who knows that you're just practicing, not a paying student. And then you can practice going through that worksheet and determining how you can best support your student, and then just choosing the practices that are going to be most appropriate for them. One thing I would say, if you're going to do this, and I really encourage you to use this worksheet and start to practice this model, but one thing I will say is that in the Hetu step, which is the second step, looking at the causes of a student's symptoms, you are not a psychoanalyst. So yoga therapists never ever conjecture about stuff we don't know or are not qualified to comment on. So when you're trying to figure out some of the causes that sit behind your students' symptoms, do not be tempted to psychologize them. Of course, if you're a qualified psychotherapist and you have permission from your students to do that, that's another matter. But keep it to what you can observe and what your student has told you, and don't get too wrapped up in trying to figure out those deep historical causes. So if you do want to try out this model, I am really happy and excited to mentor you as you learn this process. So if you would like to be mentored by me, go to the worksheet, find your volunteer student, go through that 4-step process, writing down on the worksheet, and it's an electronic worksheet, so it's nice and easy. Then go through the process of figuring out a very basic practice to meet your students' needs. And again, I recommend a 10-15-minute practice, nothing more complex than that. Keep it really, really simple. And when you've used the electronic worksheet to do that, to figure out the symptoms and the causes and the goal, and then the practices that you want to teach that student, send it to me. Just press send, it'll come to me, and I'll take a look at it for you. And then I'll be able to give you some feedback. I'll be able to do a little bit of online mentoring with you. So I'll be able to coach you through some of the approaches that you've taken, have a look at some of the ideas and the ways that you're working with these concepts. And I'll be able to give you lots of really helpful practical feedback that you can use when you go teach your students. So I hope you are excited about using the VUHA model. I am. I love it. I teach it to all of our yoga therapy trainees here at Adore Yoga, and I would love for you to get the benefits of starting to use this when you work with your private students. So go to the link with the worksheet, and that link will be not far below this video. Have a look around for it. You can send me your email, and I'll send it off to you. And yeah, send it to me, and I'll give you some feedback. Let me know if you have any questions. Just put those in the comments section. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and getting to learn about how you're working with your students. So thank you. It's been lovely to spend this time with you, and have a great day. Thanks so much.